Who are the Golden Company's friends in the Reach? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings, The Witcher and much more. If you love in-depth discussion of great fantasy and science fiction, welcome. As the Winds of Winter opens, the Golden Company has launched their invasion of Westeros in support of young Griff, aka Aegon VI. As we noted in an earlier video, this is actually not Varys and Illyrio's original plan. They wanted them to wait for Daenerys and then launch the invasion using her dragons, but ever adaptable, they are going with it anyway. And to be fair, that was at least the fourth iteration of Varys and Illyrio's plan, with the Golden Company being told to march to different parts of the continent and abandoning contracts before repeatedly being told that plans had changed once again. They have grown frustrated and decided to just launch the invasion. Dany can arrive later, and Aegon will strike an alliance with her and maybe even marry her, as Targaryens do. Either way, she will join them with their dragons, they think. But as formidable as the Golden Company are, 10,000 battle-hardened veterans plus some elephants, of course, there are some pretty large armies defending Westeros in some pretty strong castles. Attacking without the overwhelming advantage of dragons won't be easy. In fact, they have had quite a detailed discussion of it all before making the decision to go ahead, led by Harry Strickland, the Captain General of the Golden Company, who is unconvinced. Strickland shook his head stubbornly. The risk is not what it was, now that Tywin Lannister is dead. The Seven Kingdoms will never be more ripe for conquest. Another boy king sits on the Iron Throne, this one even younger than the last, and rebels are thick upon the ground as autumn leaves. Even so, said Strickland, alone we cannot hope to... Griff had heard enough of the Captain General's cowardice. We will not be alone. Dorne will join us, must join us. Prince Aegon is Elya's son as well as Rhaegar's. That's so, the boy said. And who is there left in Westeros to oppose us? A woman? A Lannister woman, insisted the Captain General. The bitch will have the Kingslayer at her side, count on that, and they will have all the wealth of Casterly Rock behind them. And Illyrio says this boy king is betrothed to the Tyrell girl, which means we must face the power of Highgarden as well. Lasswell Peake rapped his knuckles on the table. Even after a century, some of us still have friends in the Reach. The power of Highgarden may not be what Mace Tyrell imagines. So, they are not just counting on their own strength, they expect Dorne to join them. This is a fair bet, and we'll look at Doran Martell's machinations in another video, but it's reasonable to say that the Martells hate the Lannisters with a passion after the brutal murders of Elia Martell and her children, or child, depending on your perspective, and Oberyn's death at the hands of the Mountain. They will surely join up. But the Tyrells can call on a larger army from the Reach than perhaps both Dorne and the Golden Company combined. How might they oppose them? Well, Lasswell Peake, a senior member of the Golden Company, says that some of them still have friends in the Reach, implying there are some houses who might support the Golden Company rather than House Tyrell, which is intriguing. But first of all, who is Lasswell Peake, and can we believe him? We aren't given any particular background or context to him, though the appendices to A Dance with Dragons list him as an exiled lord and long-time member of the Golden Company. Presumably he hails originally from House Peake, who sided with the Blackfyres in the First Rebellion and were stripped of 2 of their 3 castles because of it. House Peake have been noticeably quiet in the story so far, despite being one of the oldest and proudest houses in the Reach. Again, we have no particular background as to what's going on with them, but it wouldn't be a surprise if they do switch sides, particularly if they think they might get back those 2 castles. They have a history of being quite an ambitious house. And Lasswell Peake's claim does not seem to be just an idle brag. It does lead to letters being sent by John Connington seeking support from those friends. We aren't given a full list of who he writes to, but having arrived in Westeros, he says that we will send out word secretly to likely friends in the Stormlands and the Reach, and Dorne. Dorne, he thinks, is the most important, noting that lesser lords might join their cause for fear of harm or hope of gain, but only the Prince of Dorne had the power to defy House Lannister and its allies. The mention of lesser lords is, I think, important here. We're not talking of anyone at the same level as the Martells, smaller houses, so we shouldn't be looking for a coup within House Tyrell, for example, but one or more of their lordly bannermen. It also casts into doubt House Hightower, who have also been noticeably quiet in the story so far, but are the oldest and definitely one of the more powerful houses out there. Sam estimates that they could field 3 times as many men as any other house sworn to the Tyrells, as well as having a significant navy and the soft power of being the chief sponsors of the Citadel and the Faith. Not particularly lesser lords, but we will look at them in more detail in a moment anyway. The letter to Doran Martell is of course what prompts Doran to send Arianne to seek for Aegon in the 2 pre-released chapters from the Winds of Winter that we have from her POV, so that letter got through and should get some success. The likely friends in the Stormlands, also relatively easy to identify, inasmuch as Jon Connington was from the Stormlands, so likely still had old friends from there, although the extent of help they would be able to offer may be limited, as Stannis had taken the bulk of his army north to the Wall. Perhaps Jon Connington is thinking about these friends when he asserts confidently that he will be able to take the mighty Storm's End by guile, rather than by force. But what about those friends in the Reach? As I said earlier, it's extremely unlikely that we're talking about a mutiny within House Tyrell, given the context of what Jon Connington was saying. We're talking about lesser lords, not lords paramount, and lesser lords joining for fear of harm or hope of gain. So we're not particularly looking for Blackfire truthers to join the cause. Not that Jon Connington seems to even think that young Griff is a Blackfire, so he wouldn't be looking for that anyway. Who might these lesser lords be? As I suggested earlier, I'm of the mindset to discount House Hightower because of their strength. They might technically be lesser, but probably not in terms of absolute strength if they put their minds to it. Probably more importantly, they are tied into the Tyrells by close marriage. Allery Hightower is Mace's wife and mother of Marjorie. They won't be wanting to undermine them. If you don't mind a small digression, there is clearly something going on with the Hightowers. Lord Leighton has disappeared into his High Tower, and there are rumours of magic. And as we are reminded by the High Sparrow in A Feast for Crows, 300 years ago, when Aegon the Dragon landed beneath this very hill, that's in King's Landing, the High Septon locked himself within the starry sept of Old Town and prayed for 7 days and 7 nights, taking no nourishment but bread and water. When he emerged, he announced that the faith would not oppose Aegon and his sisters, for the crone had lifted up her lamp to show him what lay ahead. If Old Town took up arms against the dragon, Old Town would burn, and the High Tower and the Citadel and the Starry Sept would be cast down and destroyed. Lord Manfred Hightower took that very seriously at the time. What if the Hightowers still remembered that? Or the vision they were given was not just about then, but about opposing the Targaryens more broadly, so they might think twice about joining the Tyrells in opposition to a new Targaryen invasion to stop the prophesied burning of Old Town. Although many fans do think that Old Town will burn anyway when Euron attacks. This is a real rabbit hole, and until we actually see or meet the Hightowers in the Winds of Winter, we're just speculating. They're up to something, but what? There's a video there, I'm sure. Either way, their immediate focus is clearly on defending Old Town, so even if they wanted to support Aegon, they can't really. Similarly to the Hightowers, the Redwynes are partnered to the Tyrells through close marriage. Olenna Tyrell was born a Redwyne, and although she clearly bears no great love for the Lannisters, she will not wish to endanger her granddaughter Marjorie. There are some clues here. Tyrion finds a barrel of Lord Redwyne's personal house wine in Illyrio's cellar, and at one point the Redwyne twins try to escape King's Landing on a Pentoshi ship, but these might just be, and probably are, coincidences. The Redwyne fleet is currently sailing away from Aegon's invasion to help in the defence of Old Town, so even if they are one of the mysterious friends, they aren't exactly supporting the invasion at this moment. Those unlikely friends out of the way, let's look at a few of the more likely ones. We've already mentioned House Peake, given Lasswell Peake was the one first talking about friends in the Reach, and given their rather opportunist and social climbing history and relatively recent loss of status, they certainly fit Jon Connington's characterisation of a house that is supporting their cause out of hope of gain. Might there be other members of the Golden Company with family links back to the Reach? Well, there are at least 2 more Peaks, so that link is strong. There is Sir Franklin Flowers, a bastard of House Fossaway, but he seems more concerned with killing members of House Fossaway who he hates than potentially allying with them. Rolly Duckfield, who was a member of the Golden Company for a time, is from the Reach, the son of the blacksmith to House Caswell, but he is only in Essos because he broke both of Lord Caswell's sons' arms, so he probably doesn't have many influential friends in the Reach. There are also some other apparently Westerosi surnames in evidence, like Strickland and Mandrake, though we haven't heard anything else about those names, so they may well not come from the Reach, and they are hardly like to be powerful families. In short, other than House Peak, there aren't very many clues in the Golden Company itself. So let's go on to a family, and a lord in particular, that owes its fealty to House Tyrell, but seems a bit frustrated by that. And it seems to be acting a little bit suspiciously right now. House Tarly, and its Lord Randyll Tarly. Even before we get to the current story, one could argue that there were tensions simmering between Randyll Tarly and the Tyrells. First, as a matter of personal pride, Randyll is acknowledged as perhaps the finest general in the Seven Kingdoms, leading the vanguard of the Reach's forces against Robert Baratheon's Stormlands army in Robert's rebellion, and inflicting the only defeat that Robert had. Randyll wanted to press home his advantage and wipe out Robert's forces, which might well have stopped the rebellion in its tracks, but Mace stopped him, and then history recorded the victory as Mace's rather than Randyll's. Enough for a grudge to develop. Then you have the case of the Tarleys and House Florent. You'll remember that Selyse Florent is Stannis' wife, and House Florent sided with Stannis in the Battle of the Blackwater. After that, the Lannisters stripped House Florent of its land and titles and gave it to the Tyrells, who then immediately tried to claim it, marching on Brightwater Keep. Why does this matter? Because Randyll Tarly's wife is a Florent, and the Tyrells are actively trying to wipe out her family name and take away their lands and castle. Another reason for Randyll Tarly to mislike the Tyrells. But for me, the biggest clue is in Randyll's behaviour at the small council in the very last chapter we have of A Song of Ice and Fire. He has been promoted to Master of Laws. Kevan Lannister wants to discuss the threat of the unexpected invasion of the Stormlands by someone claiming to be Aegon VI with the Golden Company. Randyll Tarly interrupts Kevan as he is introducing the topic to dismiss the invaders as no more than adventurers. He then twice disputes the idea that the person claiming to be Jon Connington actually might be Jon Connington, and once more dismisses young Griff as a feigned boy. At every turn he is dismissing and diminishing the threat, which is suspicious because Randyll Tarly is known for being ruthless, crushing opposition and being an astute general. Does he really think that the greatest sellsword company in Essos, landing just 2 weeks' march from King's Landing and already capturing castles, is not worthy of a response? Or is he trying to buy them some time to establish their bridgehead? We see all this from Kevan Lannister's perspective. Kevan is no fool and feels Randyll's antipathy in the room. As Randyll leaves the chamber, Kevan muses that Tarly is the real danger, Sir Kevan reflected as he watched their departure. A narrow man, but iron-willed and shrewd, and as good a soldier as the Reach could boast. But how do I win him to our side? Clearly Kevan Lannister doesn't think that Tarly is currently on his side. Yes, if I had to guess, the friends in the Reach are the Peaks and the Tarleys, perhaps along with whatever remains of the Florents. Old houses and significant enough to weaken the Tyrells and Lannisters if they switch sides, but still able to be considered lesser lords by Jon Connington. While we're at it, another house that might fit into that description is House Rowan. When Tywin Lannister casually mentions the murder of Rhaegar and Elya's children, Tyrion notes that Lord Mathis Rowan seems visibly to gag at the memory. Many years later, and he still finds the thought of it horrible. Now someone has returned at the head of an army claiming to be one of those children, miraculously survived. Might he not be tempted to switch sides? At the current moment in the story, he is stationed outside Storm's End, which Jon Connington thinks he can take by guile, and which seemingly does fall without a fight. Is that Mathis's doing? It's possible. If houses Tarly, Florent, Peake and Rowan all support Aegon, That is enough to set others thinking, perhaps even build some momentum so that others feel ready to defect too. Maybe there are even some more, even lesser lords we don't know about. Within a few weeks of landing, the Golden Company might be able to claim Dawn, most of the Stormlands and significant houses in the Reach too, enough to make even the Tyrells pause for thought, if they don't have Randall Tarley muttering that the invasion is just adventurers led by a feigned boy. But at a higher level, I do wonder if the list of friends in the Reach might actually matter little. The last action we see in A Dance with Dragons is the murder of Kevan Lannister by Varys and the framing of House Tyrell. If Cersei does something dramatic in response, like on the show when she blew up the Great Sept to get at both the High Sparrow and the Tyrells at the same time, the Tyrells might and probably would turn sides and support Aegon against Cersei in their own right. The alliance between the Tyrells and the Lannisters is one of convenience and marriage rather than any deep friendship. The mysterious friends in the Reach may find themselves betraying House Tyrell, only to soon after find themselves back on House Tyrell's side under a different king. It could be awkward. Either way, I think the outcome is for Cersei to be isolated and unpopular in King's Landing, and face a charismatic challenger claiming to be Aegon VI, with 3 of the 7 kingdoms already lined up behind him. A formidable prospect. But who do you think the mysterious friends in the Reach are? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the link to my playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.